Hungry Holler Art Refuge in Uchi, and joining me is artist Jan Meng. Jan, I love this place here because of the combination of art and garden. They just fuse harmoniously.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's by design in a very weird way. It's an eccentric garden, which people who know me will understand that. And I'm just so glad y'all are here. I'm glad you're back, Kevin. You too, Laura. Thanks. But I love to combine art in the garden. And I'm talking about organic art and also more structure, more hardscape in the garden.
And you have a number of materials you work with.
I do.
You weld, and so we'll see some metal in many different shapes and forms.
That's right. And I never really know how it's going to happen. I have found, and if anybody is interested in doing art in the garden, just do it. You know, don't think you have to plan too far ahead. Just kind of let things happen, evolve. If you've got, the biggest thing I can tell people is have the material. If you see something that strikes your fancy in the world, haul it home.
And I'm like you, I have a collection of parts waiting to be assembled.
There you go. You know exactly, because if you don't have the stuff, you cannot create.
Right. Another media you work with a lot is in concrete and making castings.
I do.
And you're well known, of course, for the gourds.
That is primarily, I guess, what I've been known for. I'm a woman of extremes. My art is very lightweight, gourds, which weigh almost nothing. And then I go to concrete and rock, which is, of course, very cumbersome, but I do love it. And I bring the garden into my concrete work. I do botanical castings. This is an elephant ear leaf, and I use concrete. I don't like hyper-tufa. If you're going to go to this much effort, and if a leaf is going to sacrifice itself for your art, I want it to be forever.
I think you get more of the fine detail when you work with the concrete.
You know, you're exactly right, Kim.
Now, the other part of using the plants, you use them in your molds, but I like this real interesting use. You've actually started to kind of sculpt with the plant.
I do. I made a big grape wreath vine there, and I hung it, and I had this vine starting to come up onto the building, and years ago I started feeding that vine into the grapevine wreath, and finally, you know, you have to be patient when you're a gardener.
Yes.
And finally, if you just keep at it and keep trimming and working with it, you get something like that, and I love that. I always manage to sneak a peek through it through the dogwood here. I often think it should be in a more showy place, but you know, it's
a
where
little surprise.
It's where it's at, right.
Now, you have another type of casting where you're making these wonderful containers. Let's go take a look.
All right, let's do that.
Jan, tell me about these planters you have here.
Well, this is part of my mania. I love hens and chicks and sedum. And I should know all their botanical names. Forgive me, WFH Russell Studebaker. He is always trying to get me to be more adult in how I describe my plantings.
But luckily, sedum is the scientific name.
There you go.
As well as the common name. So you have one
Thank
down.
you, Kim. But I absolutely love them, but I've never been happy with the planters or containers I see them in. So several years ago, I started making these sandcast concrete planters. They're all eccentric, they're all very different. Each one is one of a kind. Hens and chicks absolutely love to have their cheeks up against hardscape. And so that's what I've started doing here with these. And I like them big and I like them bold. They're very heavy.
You have a lot of interesting little detail work worked into these.
That's very true. I have found, though, when the planter is very successful, that a lot of the art gets hidden or is just exposed, you know, from time to time as the plant ebbs and flows, which in itself is kind of a performance art, but I love that. But they're one of my favorite things.
A number of these elements that we've looked at, you have in other elements of the landscape kind of coming back again. Let's go look at some of those mosaics.
Great.
Jan, you have some really interesting sculptures back here that tie together some of these different techniques that we've been looking at, especially like in the mosaic here. Tell me about these.
Well, this does combine gardening and my love of solar lights, concrete, and gardening. Only I can get all that into one thing, I guess. But I love this. This is an old bedstead, an old mattress spring, and old bed spring. And I filled it with concrete and all kinds of doodads, as I call them. But always, when I'm doing garden art, I always put some place where I can tuck in a little bit of sedum or a little plant. And this is done with beer bottles.
Okay.
I love Mexican beer bottles. They silk screen their labels. They don't just put a paper label on, and so I appreciate that little extra effort.
I love how you've repurposed so many different elements that you might find at a garage sale or somewhere else and brought them together.
That's exactly what I do. Mark brings it home or I bring it home. We might not use it right away, but I pretty much know what I have here, and sooner or later I'll use it.
When I look at the landscape itself, there's little elements worked in throughout, and one of these I would consider land art out here in the pasture behind us and up front. Tell me about those.
We have 6 acres here. About half of it is the holler proper, and the other we've kind of left as pasture, but we have done something different with it. For years now, my husband Mark has been mowing beautiful patterns in our pasture, and it's not like a labyrinth, it's not a maze, it's circles and gourd shapes, round shapes is what he primarily does. And he mows these beautiful round spaces, and they each have a dot in the middle of pasture grass, and it's lovely. You can watch the seasons change just by the outline of the circles and the dots in the middle. And sometimes they have wildflowers growing in them, sometimes it's a fragrant weed of some kind, and in the fall then you watch them all change to these beautiful hues of blonde and pink and beige. And it's one of my favorite parts about the holler. I love the pasture mowings.
Now, you have a lot of built-up beds, and you told me that's because your soil's terrible here.
What soil? If you drive a shovel into my property here, you get sparks.
Well, one of the things you're really well known for in the art world is your work with gourds, and we're going to look at some of that. But first, gourds are just amazing. There's so much diversity, and let's take a look at a few of these. And this is fun.
Yes, isn't she beautiful? That is my companion gourd. I've had that gourd for many years, and it was grown in one of the mystical regions for gourd growing in the United States, which is Mississippi. And it's just a little smaller than the world record. I can't put my arms all the way around it.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Isn't she beautiful?
And what's fun, this is the same species,
it is,
right?
It is.
Okay.
Lagenaria ciceroria.
And they range in size and shape from this little tiny thing to these
to the giant. Gourds are like people, you know, we're all the same on one very big level, but everybody's unique, everybody's different.
Okay, and what about the ones with these are the ones we commonly see as birdhouses with the hooked neck.
Yeah,
this
a lot of people do.
This
is a big one, and this is a prize. Just look at this great stem. Also, this gourd gives you a beautiful picture of how gourds dry and the serendipity nature of it. This beautiful line through here and up here is all caused by the skin cracking and splitting in the drying process. And then this is more exposed to the elements and to weather. And so you get this beautiful, almost raku effect. It's all natural. I love that.
You have some different kinds in here. This is bumpy one.
Oh yeah, I love this one. This is an African warty, and they're characterized by these beautiful textured surfaces. It's texture on top of texture on top of texture. And they're often also this kind of a yellow or creamy tone, which is a beautiful thing too. Tough as nails. You could put that in a cement mixer and it would come out perfect.
Now this one has kind of an interesting story to it. Tell me about
this. This is a zucca. And this is one of the few gourds that had a commercial use.
Okay.
Before the 1950s, zuccas were grown to make fruitcake filling. if you can believe it. And they would harvest green, chop it up, color it, do whatever they do to that stuff.
Okay.
And then in the 1950s, they started using something else and they stopped growing it. And a number of years ago, a call went out into gourddom. Does anybody have any zucca seeds? And one gentleman did, and gourd heads are very giving and sharing people. And now people are growing zuccas again. But you can see it has a beautiful crown on it, very dimpled, great twisted stem. They're a beautiful gourd. They tend to be a little thin shelled, so I don't really use them in my work, but I do like to have them up on a wall or something just in and of themselves. They're beautiful.
Well, let's go take a look over here. We brought out a few pieces from the gallery. You have those great forms to start with, and then of course you take that to a whole new level.
I love gourds. They're a wonderful base, and they're beautiful. You can go from the sublime natural look of this gourd, this is a birdhouse or feeder, to something that is just so overwrought. This is a Xeriscape Gourd head.
I love this. Only a gardener would come up with this.
Isn't that the truth?
All the words relate to xeriscaping. What fun. That is fantastic.
I love it.
This piece caught my eye immediately when we walked in this studio. Tell us about this.
This is a Gourd Luminaria. I love light in dark space. I like patterns and surprises, and this is what this gourd is all about. It's covered with holes. I drilled every one of them myself, and I've textured it. There's a hole in the bottom of the gourd. It slides over a concrete base holding a light, and when you turn this on in the dark, Kim, it is absolutely breathtaking. It shows patterns of light up on your ceiling and against all your walls. The interesting thing is the holes are round, but the projections are geometric.
Because of the angles that it's
Exactly
coming out.
right.
Yeah.
You're a physicist.
Who knew?
I suspected. But it's beautiful. It is. The light is bent because of the round circle on a curved space with a little depth, and it is just beautiful.
But you have done some really amazing work with nature, taken Mother Nature and come out with some wonderful combinations. Now people could come out and visit here, correct?
They can. They should email me first.
Okay.
We can put my email out for folks. They can look at hungryholler.com on the web, and on the Etsy website. I also have a shop on Etsy as well.
Well, I would encourage everyone to come visit. It's been such a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure to have you. I'm glad everybody came back. Thank you.